The blue fairy slowly awakens inside the hollow of the ancient treant as morning light breaks through. A giant moose turns toward the sudden burst of light from the ancient treant as fog rolls back. The blue fairy spreads her massive dark blue moth wings, revealing their full heavy wingspan. The blue fairy lowers her bare feet onto the velvet moss, stepping out of the ancient treant hollow. The blue fairy trails her fingers on the ancient treant bark as golden leaves spiral down around her. The blue fairy walks onto the velvet moss, leaving a glowing blue energy trail behind her. Golden fireflies scatter as morning drizzle falls, creating ripples in forest puddles. A raindrop rolls down the blue fairy's cheek as sunlight creates a micro rainbow beside her. The blue fairy steps over the moss-covered stone marker as her wings scatter the last raindrops. The blue fairy pushes through the luminescent hanging vines, releasing glowing pollen into the air. The blue fairy lets the vines snap back as wind turns the ferns into rippling green waves. The massive moose sniffs the glowing blue footprints left by the blue fairy on the path. The blue fairy folds her wings and walks through the narrow stone gorge as light turns mystical cyan. The blue fairy's fingertips trace the ancient elven carvings on the mossy gorge wall. The blue fairy marches through the ruins as the sky shifts rapidly into dramatic twilight purple. The blue fairy's wings release glittering sapphire dust as stars pierce the twilight sky. A massive flock of glowing monarch butterflies erupts from the treetops, spiraling into the crimson storm cloud. The blue fairy stops at the gorge exit, bracing against the sudden violent drop in air pressure. The blue fairy walks into the wide open forest clearing, leaving glowing blue footprints with every step. The sapphire glow of the blue fairy's footprints fades as thick fog swallows the gorge entrance. The blue fairy uses her wings as a shield, pushing through the dense thorny bramble thicket. The blue fairy traces the ancient crystalline pillar, causing it to erupt in blinding internal glow. The blue fairy breathes in the glowing misty energy from the ancient crystalline pillar as frost spreads. The blue fairy's eyes glow azure as localized snow falls only within her aura. The giant moose watches at the edge as the magical frost ring turns the forest into a sea of diamonds. The blue fairy shatters the frozen ground with each heavy step as moonlight pillars light her path. The blue fairy forces open her frozen wings, cracking off thick ice in heavy chunks.
The magical frost melts on the ancient frozen tree archway, releasing a shimmering curtain of liquid silver.
The blue fairy stands before the massive wall of giant luminescent ferns, watching glowing green spores drift down. The blue fairy submerges herself in the giant luminescent fern wall, creating lingering glowing pathways. The blue fairy wraps her wings tightly, pushing through the glowing foliage as leaves close seamlessly behind her. The blue fairy drifts through the bioluminescent darkness as glowing spores catch in her hair and energy particles rush toward her.
The giant fern wall canopy bulges in a massive emerald dome as torrential rain suddenly batters the glowing leaves.
The blue fairy emerges from the fern wall with dry, pulsing aura as the storm clouds form a tight funnel above her. The blue fairy steps onto the obsidian bridge and fractures it with her glowing palms, creating blue cracks.
The glowing cracks reach the massive sealed stone doorway, causing it to open and spill blinding golden light.
The blue fairy turns toward the opening doors as magical rain flash boils into dense steam over the ravine. The blue fairy draws her massive glowing crystalline blade and flares her wings in an aggressive stance. The blue fairy steps forward as steam freezes mid-air, suspending boiling droplets around her focused eyes. The blue fairy raises her blade as a swarm of fireflies and monarch butterflies forms a halo while the doors lock open. A single snow rabbit sits illuminated as the sky shifts into a chaotic crimson and black vortex.
The blue fairy points her glowing blade as the doorway light turns blood red, and a giant maple leaf lands on the tip.
The vibrant green maple leaf transfers brilliant emerald aura into the blue fairy's massive glowing crystalline blade.
The ominous shadow recoils as the red glow fades and the sky dissolves into serene morning twilight.
The blue fairy lowers her blade and meets the green fairy as morning sunlight illuminates the obsidian bridge. The blue fairy and green fairy press fingertips together, releasing a shockwave of cyan and emerald energy. The blue fairy and green fairy walk side by side across the bridge as their wings cast blue and green light mosaics. The green fairy seals the glowing blue fractures with rapidly growing vines and roots as golden leaves scatter. The blue fairy and green fairy enter the vast circular clearing of ancient elven monoliths as their auras clear a path. The green fairy kneels and pushes heavy emerald energy into the massive fallen marble pillar, purifying its blackened roots. The blue fairy flares her massive dark blue moth wings, pulling diseased ash away as glowing blue snow drifts down.
A massive swarm of monarch butterflies pulses color over the purified marble pillar as heavy rain begins to fall.
The blue fairy and green fairy march deeper as the blue fairy shields them from the violent gust and intensifying rain. The green fairy strains to command the earth beneath the ancient giant lotus fountain as green fissures spread rapidly. The blue fairy adds her strength to the green fairy, forcing combined sapphire and emerald energy into the fountain core. The ancient giant lotus fountain erupts in a massive geyser as storm clouds break, revealing a vibrant double rainbow. A family of snow rabbits drinks from the glowing fountain water as it turns warm, pulsing amber in golden hour light. The green fairy dips her hands into the restored fountain, lifting a heavy, pulsing sphere of liquid magic. The vast circular clearing transforms into a glowing elven sanctuary as the giant moose wades through the river under sunset gold. The blue fairy and green fairy stand back to back, drawing ancient glowing magic as golden fireflies swirl around them. The green fairy points and sends a heavy twisting vine of emerald energy shooting toward the dormant ancient stone archway.
The blue fairy unleashes sapphire energy, colliding with the green fairy's emerald beam at the ancient stone archway apex.
Intricate elven runes carve themselves into the ancient stone archway keystone as dust freezes into a glowing galaxy.
The combined magic tiers open a swirling dimensional vortex portal within the ancient stone archway as night falls. The green fairy steps toward the portal and drags her fingertips through the event horizon, creating liquid ripples. The blue fairy places her glowing hand on the green fairy's shoulder, offering silent solidarity as turquoise light soothes the portal glare. The blue fairy and green fairy push their intertwined hands past the portal boundary as the liquid light boils violently.
The portal collapses with a silent implosion as the two fairies vanish, leaving the sanctuary bathed in cold, full moon light.
The blue fairy and green fairy stumble into the alien crystalline cavern as jagged amethyst crystals ignite with menacing purple glow.
The blue fairy flares her wings to shield the green fairy while locking eyes on the dark, narrow tunnel ahead. The blue fairy flares her wings to shield the green fairy while locking eyes on the dark, narrow tunnel ahead.
The fairy's glowing footprints press into silvery dust as a single lost golden firefly struggles in the alien cavern.
The green fairy pushes warm emerald magic into the lifeless cavern dust, but it shatters violently into green static. The blue fairy hauls the green fairy up, and they march toward the dark tunnel as amethyst crystals dim hungrily. The blue fairy summons her glowing crystalline blade, revealing thousands of massive dormant hanging fleshy cocoons coating the tunnel roof.
A single massive twitching cocoon oozes viscous fluid as freezing air condenses the fairy's breath into heavy white vapor.
The green fairy steps back in horror, crossing her arms as purple light mixes into a sickly magenta hue around them. The blue fairy raises her blade to shield the green fairy as the tunnel throbs with terrifying fleshy red light. Hundreds of massive cocoons violently writhe open, surrounding the two fairies, as the cavern walls sweat dark tears under red light. The green fairy slams her hands into the walls, injecting violent emerald magic that erupts thick, thorny vines from the stone. The green fairy's thick, thorny vines crush the dust, as terrified monarch butterflies flutter frantically in blinding green light. The blue fairy drops her blade and grabs the green fairy's shoulders as a blinding shockwave of conflicting magic detonates. The blue fairy carries the unconscious green fairy through the rift back to the home world as the portal collapses into melting frost. The massive shockwave from the fairy's return ripples across the forest as the sky turns to a hyper-saturated crimson sunset. The blue fairy lays the green fairy at the center of the ancient stone circle and channels thick sapphire energy into the runes. The blue fairy presses her forehead to the green fairy, transferring pure life force as golden fireflies form a protective cylinder.
The blue fairy sways hypnotically, weaving dormant nature magic into the green fairy as the yellow leaves begin to revive.
The green fairy awakens with renewed emerald eyes as her dress revives and the fireflies shift to soothing emerald light. The blue fairy pulls the green fairy into a profound absolute embrace as the monarch butterflies form a swirling vortex around them. The blue fairy's thumb strokes the green fairy's knuckle as heavy dew crystallizes into sapphires and emeralds on their joined hands. The blue fairy and green fairy step apart with joined hands and begin a majestic, gravity-defying dance across the glowing runes.
The fairy's heavy dance fills the ancient stone circle carvings as dead vines bloom into massive, glowing blue and green lotus flowers.
The blue fairy and green fairy create an infinite loop of cyan and emerald energy, producing thick, glowing syrup-like rain. The syrupy magical rain strikes the blue fairy's feathers as the green fairy enters serene ecstasy under shifting bioluminescent light. The interwoven cyan and emerald dome radiates from the ancient stone circle as the giant moose walks in and night frost forms under stars. The blue fairy leads the green fairy out of the circle as their footsteps bloom fiercely bioluminescent blue mushrooms and green moss. The blue fairy points toward the ancient treant as the green fairy leans exhausted against her under a solid column of starlight. From the blue fairy's view, she pushes aside luminescent vines, revealing the warmly lit ancient treant hollow as golden fireflies synchronize in welcome. A snow rabbit watches a glowing blue footprint press into the frozen moss as heavy frost melts into sparkling water droplets. The blue fairy guides the green fairy into the warm, glowing hollow and lowers her onto the thick moss bed. The green fairy traces the glowing cyan patterns on the blue fairy's arm as her aura softens into soothing turquoise light. The blue fairy slides down and drapes her massive wing over the green fairy as the hollow runes pulse in unison with their breathing. The giant moose approaches and kneels at the base of the ancient treant, keeping watch as freezing fog rolls back into warm sanctuary. The green fairy slips her hand into the blue fairy's as golden fireflies transform her wing into a pulsing starry tapestry. A swarm of monarch butterflies lands on the resting giant moose as warm golden light creates eternal twilight around the snow rabbit. A swarm of monarch butterflies lands on the resting giant moose as warm golden light creates eternal twilight around the snow rabbit. The blue fairy succumbs to deep magical slumber as her cyan aura retracts, leaving only warm golden light in the hollow. The blue fairy and green fairy blend together in perfect union as the ancient treant roots seal their resting hollow.
Winter holds the dormant magical forest in perfect stillness as a single glowing blue ribbon flows from the lotus fountain.
A natural botanical cocoon slowly weaves around the ancient treant hollow, sealing the peaceful reunion of the two fairies.
Winter dissolves around the ancient stone circle as the botanical blanket breaks open, revealing the character in image 1 and character in image 2.
The blue fairy opens her eyes, and the two fairies stretch together as honey yellow sunlight fills the hollow. Sunlight evaporates water on ancient stones, as luminous butterflies shake frost dust from the moose antlers. The blue fairy and green fairy land at the glowing fountain as the moose and snow rabbits nuzzle the roots under protective mist. The green fairy spreads her maple leaf dress as young seeds sprout, and the elven forest awakens in pristine magic. The blue fairy's wings fade to stardust as the amber gemstone seal on their joined fingers glows with a pure dewdrop.
The camera pulls back, revealing abandoned stone towers under fiery sunset as emerald light dissipates into peaceful, starry night.
The two fairies fold their wings in the fairy garden as soft rose petal light weaves soothing harmony and wipes away all trauma.
The blue fairy releases a blue galaxy into the starry sky as the green fairy watches in relaxed wonder. The two fairies stroll around the glowing emerald jade fountain as silver mist and sparkling reflections create blended light. The peaceful forest glows under heavenly aurora as rabbits and the giant moose guard the two fairies in eternal sleep. The two fairies hug in eternal, peaceful sleep as morning mist and rising sun welcome the new cycle,